So your company has a decent sized call center and it's primarily doing outbound calling. Well, I may not have to be the person to tell you that you really need to be aware of TCPA compliance. Now, there's been a lot of recent additions to the TCPA compliance guidelines that you really want to look at. And all this kind of just happened recently. They're always kind of adding a little bit here and there to make sure people aren't abusing outbound calling. But especially recently, there's been a lot of new stuff added. And you may not want to take on this responsibility internally. In fact, a good idea would be to outsource the TCPA compliance to your call center software provider so that all that stuff is easy to manage and regulated by them instead of you having to stay up to date on all the specific laws and things like that. So in the video today, what I'd like to do is detail some of the things call center software providers can handle for you or can help you with when it comes to TCPA compliance. So the first thing that call center software providers can do to help mitigate risk when it comes to TCPA compliance is they can really give you content control across multiple platforms. So if your call center is reaching out via phone, also on text messaging, also on email messaging, they can actually give you a way to manage content across all those platforms in one window. So you can keep track of opt-outs, like for instance, if somebody opts out of email, you may not want to opt them out of phone calls, or you may not want to opt them out of text messages, or maybe they just opted out of text messages because they don't prefer to be contacted that way, but you don't want to opt them out of email. So you can control that in one window, which helps keep you compliant, which helps mitigate risk. Another thing that call center software providers can do for you in terms of TCPA compliance is they can actually monitor the number of call attempts or contact attempts being made across all channels. So say you only want to contact someone on phone X amount of times, and on email X amount of times, and on SMS messaging X amount of times, and you want to stay compliant in all those different areas separately, but at the same time you want to max out your number of attempts in each one of those areas. Well, some of these software vendors allow you to do that. So not just contact attempts period per contact record, but per channel, per communications channel. So they can break it up into separate, or they can put it all into one, depending on the type of compliance you're trying to meet. Another thing, it's pretty self-explanatory, is time zone monitoring. So call center software providers, or contact center software providers, as they're called a lot of times today, can actually regulate for you the different time zones. And that's pretty simple, so that you don't want to be reaching out and violating your compliance and reaching out and calling someone at 6 o'clock in the morning when it's really 9 o'clock in the morning your time, it's 6 o'clock in the morning their time, or vice versa. You don't want to be calling someone at 10 o'clock at night when you're not supposed to be. So they can monitor all of that stuff for you based on area code and zip code, which leads me to something else they can do, which is scrubbing your list in terms of the zip code matching up with the area code. Because we all know sometimes you might have a contact whose zip code is one thing, but the area code of their phone number for text messaging and phone calls is another. So that's something you have to be leery about in terms of violating TCPA compliance. You want to make sure that you're reaching out the proper time of day, but if you're going by the area code, you might be going by the wrong thing because the zip code says something different. So the cloud contact center provider can point out discrepancies between those two, that hey, these two area code and zip codes are in different time zones. You may want to double check your data. So it can point out those discrepancies for you. Another thing call center software providers can do for you is regulate call recording compliance. So as we all know, sometimes you're on a call, sometimes you're required to make sure that the person on the other end of the phone is aware that call is being recorded. So the call center software provider can make sure that happens every single time to make sure you're in compliance. What about if your company is dialing into different states? Well, each state has different laws when it comes to outbound calls and text messages and things like that. So instead of you having to keep up to date on every single state you're calling into and what all their laws are on all these different things, your call center software provider can do that for you. Now, what about cell phones? Does your company want to be reaching out to people on their cell phones? Or maybe you only want to be reaching out to people on their cell phones. Maybe you're sending text messages and you want to make sure you're only text messaging cell phones as opposed to regular phones or landlines. So that's something the call center software providers can do for you, is they can make sure that they separate cell phones from regular landlines. They can also make sure that your list is scrubbed with the Do Not Call Registry. That's kind of a basic that's been around a long time, but that's definitely something you don't want to take on internally because it's changing all the time. You want the call center software provider to do that for you. And last but not least is screen recording. So say you want to be able to record the interactions that are going on with people text messaging your call center agents, and you want to record that screen, and yet at the same time you don't want to violate any privacy laws and get fined for doing that. So that's something that the call center software provider can also do for you when it comes to TCPA compliance. So I know that was a long list. I hope it was helpful. If so, click the like button down below, and by all means, if you want to know which vendors are the best fit for your company in terms of call center software that can help you with TCPA compliance, don't just Google it. Reach out to me. That's my job. I'm a broker for all the major cloud contact center service providers, and based on your company's needs, I can find the best vendors that your company should be quoting, introduce you to them, get you demos, get you quotes, and make sure you're well taken care of. And the best thing is those service providers pay our company our broker fee. So your company never has to pay us. So there's absolutely no excuse not to use us to do it, and no excuse why you need to spend an hour on Google trying to figure out which vendor to use and end up choosing the wrong one anyway. So reach out. I'm happy to answer any questions you have or help give you my recommendations and pair you up with some great vendors. I hope that video helped a little bit. Have a great day.